How are we doing, friends? Welcome back into the SFS channel here. My name is Gavin, and we're going to be diving in this morning on a Thursday into some fantasy football tiers for the running back and wide receiver positions. This episode, of course, is the running back segment. We're not going to get too long-winded with our analysis here. We're going to keep things short and concise, get straight to the point here, and break down the way I see things unfolding this week. Now, part of the crazy holiday season of traveling and me having a kind of on-the-road studio right now is that our schedule kind of got pumped back a little bit for this week, which I've actually found kind of played to our benefit for this episode. We're recording this on Wednesday evening, so I'm equipped with a little bit more injury-related news and availability status that I otherwise wouldn't have had if I recorded this on a Tuesday, which is when we've regularly been recording this segment throughout this season. So first and foremost, to start off today's episode, the one thing I do want to reference is that Derrick Henry is doubtful for Thursday night's matchup against the Dallas Cowboys. That is kind of a low blow to fantasy managers here. That really sucks. I did contemplate Hassan Haskins for this list, but at the end of the day, I'm not super confident things are going to turn out super well for Tennessee and a Malik Willis-led offense against that feisty front seven of Dallas. So stay tuned throughout today's episode to see if he falls in here at any point in today's episode, but obviously that removes Derrick Henry for the most part from this rankings list. Of course, you're starting him if he plays, but that doubtful tag is fairly concerning and troubling, obviously. So to start out tier one here, we've got Austin Eckler and Christian McCaffrey left to right for the order. So I said that backwards there actually. CMC has Las Vegas at Allegiant Stadium this week, so playing in a dome in Las Vegas. That's very good for weather conditions. Obviously a little bit less impactful for the running back position, but regardless here, this is a Raiders team that's kind of dead in the water. They're frustrated. They're pissed off. They're kind of shaking their heads, wondering what happened to their season. And what I think here is really interesting is the benching of Derek Carr, and he's actually going to be stepping away from the team for the next couple of weeks here and allowing Jarrett Stidham to be the starting quarterback for this group to allow the front office to get a peek at some of the younger players there. So I think this could be a really disastrous game against a really tough defense, allowing Christian McCaffrey and the San Francisco 49ers offense to get some more run here. So at the end of the day, I think this is an easy RB1 plug and play for me. And then Austin Eckler, this week he has got the Los Angeles Rams. Eckler's just a touchdown machine. Running the ball, they aren't great. The LA Rams have been solid stopping the run this year for much of the season. However, Eckler's not your traditional back. He's going out there, he's catching passes, he's doing things very dynamically and getting things done in other ways here. So again, touchdown production and receiving volume, that's obviously where you're getting his numbers from. Tier 2 here is my running backs 3 through 7. Now, this is a really interesting group. This has changed a lot down the stretch of this season with injuries and other situations changing to a great extent. Travis Etienne, you may feel I'm overly bullish on here, and this could very well blow up disastrously in my face. Now, regardless of my ranking here, you're still starting him in a fantastic matchup against Houston this week. This is me maybe blindly giving the benefit of the doubt to the Jags organization to actually put their best foot forward in this game. We'll see what happens. I'm not someone that overanalyzes the tanking aspect of the game for teams that are in situations where, they have nothing left to play for and want to lose games to the end of the season. I'm also not somebody that necessarily thinks that in this situation with the Jags, there is going to be a significant pullback in touches and opportunity for Travis Etienne, despite the fact that for both the Titans and the Jags, they're not really playing for anything this week in terms of the AFC South divisional playoff race. So if you're wondering what I mean by that, essentially all that matters for the playoff team coming out of that division is who wins the Week 18 head-to-head contest. So for me, Travis Etienne this week is an incredibly good start. We'll see how they continue to deploy their players throughout 4 quarters. Like I said, could blow up in my face, but I'm someone that tries not to overanalyze things. And, based on the information we have at hand, I will go forward with that. But as long as he's out there starting and on the field, the monster potential is there. And he's still a tier 2 player for me regardless, whether you want to have him at this 3 or this 7 spot. I'm just very confident that he'll get out there and get the job done at a high level this week. Dalvin Cook against Green Bay. This Packers team doesn't really have an answer for the run game right now. And also, with how much attention they're probably going to pay to Justin Jefferson after the Week 1 debacle against him, there's going to be kind of, 2 players working against the weakness of this defense. So I see a whole lot of opportunity for efficiency, big playmaking, and overall fantasy production from Cook this week. Really, really liking him in matchups. Saquon Barkley taking on Indianapolis, another team with a lot to play for in the Giants. And the Colts team, like I said, I'm not super big into buying into tanking teams. I'm not necessarily even saying that the Colts are trying to do that here, but what I do believe is true is that this offense is terrible. They are frequently going 3 and out, not sustaining drives. Their defense gets tuckered out by the end of 4 quarters, and you can get gashing holes in the run game against them and create some really big play opportunities on the other side of the football. So for me, if I'm looking at this, I like this as a matchup for Saquon. I think that this Giants team, like I said, and I'm going to continue to preface this throughout today's episode because I know it comes up a ton here down the stretch of the season, but teams have a lot to play for. You're trying to put good film on tape. The Giants are still contending for the playoffs here, but the offense, I think, is the biggest factor to me liking this matchup for the Colts, and how lackluster that offense has been in terms of the opportunities that presents for Saquon Barkley in this Giants rushing attack here. James Conner against the Atlanta Falcons this week. He has been a bona fide stud and workhorse since coming back in the later parts of the season from dealing with multiple ailments this year. He's been a touchdown machine. He's been the engine of this offense. Sounds like we're going to get Colt McCoy back for this game as well, so hopefully some improved passing attack here. Again, I'm expecting James Conner to be the biggest producer for this team. And then Ramondre Stevenson taking on a Dolphins team this week. Ramondre was a big flop in week 16. That sucked. That cost a couple of my teams semifinal matchups last week, but also, propelled me to championships and others where I was going up against Stevenson. So, it kind of comes full circle there. But at the end of the day, this is a really interesting matchup. Sounds like we're going to see Teddy Bridgewater starting for the Dolphins regardless. I still expect this to be a fairly close and tightly contested football game. As we all know, and as I've said numerous times this season, the Pats offense runs through Ramondre Stevenson. We've seen that for months upon months now. So basically, it's going to come down to how efficient he is with the touches he gets, and ultimately if he's able to find the end zone or not. My running backs 8 through 11 in this tier 3 group are also incredibly interesting to me. So starting out with Josh Jacobs, I hate to go here, but I got a whole lot of heat throughout this season through trying to promote selling high on Josh Jacobs while he was literally the RB1 in fantasy football, while he looked like an absolute stud league winner. Now, he absolutely could put you in a position and still could be riding high on championship teams heading into week 17 here. But if you looked at the last 2 weeks, the issues that I circled and outlined for Josh Jacobs have come to fruition here. Brutal performance against Pittsburgh in a game where they should have had the opportunity to run the football. They didn't do so effectively whatsoever. Even the round 1 matchup in week 15 still wasn't his best showing. He cracked double digits, but barely. And if he is your running back 1, certainly was not the level of producer that you're looking for. Now, for this week, I never could have predicted the situation with Jarrett Stidham, and that's not necessarily what I want to say here, but this is the fantasy matchup nightmare from hell. You do not want to be playing the San Francisco 49ers defense, and you don't want to be doing so with your backup quarterback in his first ever NFL start, as referenced to the Las Vegas situation a little bit earlier. So this, to me, is something that could go completely brutally south. You might be looking at 5 points or fewer from Josh Jacobs this week. Now, you might be asking me, Gavin, why are you having him as your running back 8 this week? Purely out of respect. He has done beautiful, brilliant things in his body of work this season, and they might just turn around and hand the ball off 35 times to him this week. Who knows? But the bust potential is absolutely there for him to fall through the floor and have one of those just crazy, terrible games here. As I talked about with CMC, game script should be all 49ers here. That's what things on paper look to point to. And barring Jarrett Stidham coming out here and playing better than Derek Carr, which I guess, yeah, Derek's been playing pretty crappy lately, you're going to have some struggles, and I expect offensive deficiencies here from this Raiders team. Aaron Jones here, incredibly dynamic, very skilled and talented playmaker. The one problem that I've had for him is that as this Packers offense has trended upwards, their scoring has risen. They've went on a win streak here, and they're making a run towards the NFL playoffs. We've seen more goal line opportunities, more rushing attempts inside the 5-yard line. And that sounds great, but the troubling thing to me is that A.J. Dillon is soaking up this work, which puts a cap, obviously, on Aaron Jones' week-to-week fantasy ceiling. So while I love the player, I love the skill set, everything, the efficiency is there as well. You're looking at a situational flaw here that could potentially be a little bit troublesome in terms of how that relates to going out there in a decent matchup. He could go out here and exploit this football team, but there are limitations to me based on what we've seen the last month or so for what he can do every single game. Nick Chubb here, the Browns have Washington, another very, very big game for the Packers, as a matter of fact. Not that that matters whatsoever for fantasy football, but Nick Chubb's facing a tough front seven here. You're going to need him to be efficient. His ceiling has actually kind of sputtered out here as Deshaun Watson has taken over. This offense is going through a transition period right now. It's been kind of shaky. It hasn't been pretty, but at the end of the day, this is still Nick Chubb. You're thinking 4.5, 5 yards per carry, roughly 18 to 20 touches. You're just hoping he finds the end zone and ultimately gives you between, if he goes for 100 and a touchdown on the ground, no receptions, you're looking at 16 fantasy points. If he gets in the end zone twice, 22. Hoping for the best here for Chubb, but his ceiling has, noticeably come down since roughly past that midseason marker. And then Joe Mixon here against Buffalo. This is going to be probably the matchup of the week in terms of just, viewing pleasure for NFL fans. Cincinnati, Buffalo, Josh Allen, Joe Burrow. Super fun stuff there. But Joe Mixon, another player. Samaje Perine has been more involved. That has been noticeable in the snap count percentages and just in terms of the opportunity share being not, drastically shifted here. And I'm not suggesting in any way, shape, or form that Samaje is taking over Joe Mixon's workload. What I am suggesting, though, is that it has had a noticeable fantasy impact in terms of the amount of touches Joe Mixon's getting per game and whatnot. So Buffalo did show some weaknesses to the run game. David Montgomery, while Chicago was actually leading that game, started out strong, then kind of fizzled out as Chicago's offense sputtered out. The week prior, Raheem Mostert did some really good things against that team in that snowstorm game in week 15. So it's kind of a variable performance atmosphere here for Joe Mixon. We'll see what happens. All right, I'm kicking off tier 4 with Tony Pollard. I apologize. I always say I'm not going to get too long-winded, and then we talk for like a minute each for those original players, which, to be honest, need the least amount of explanation. So into tier 4 now, Tony Pollard against Tennessee. Plain and simple, I expect Dallas to control this game. I think Tennessee's offense really struggles, and Dallas gets frequent opportunities, dominates time of possession. It opens up gashing run lanes for explosive Tony Pollard, and he can catch the football as well. Alvin Kamara here, that was a little bit of a odd transition there. At Philadelphia this week, Philly is in kind of a weird situation where we still don't know Jalen Hurts versus Gardner Minshew. For the Saints, they're still kind of in the NFC playoff race in the NFC South, but we don't really know at the end of the day here. Regardless, AK, this is a workable matchup. Things have been getting tougher here, but Philly's also had, after getting healthy for like a 2-week stretch, they're starting to regress back into the injury pool. It's a tough game to get the read on here. He just needs his touches, his rushing attempts, his passing opportunities, more importantly, which have come sporadically throughout the year. And then, of course, touchdown production would help. Cam Akers, someone I actually really love this week at the running back 14 position. He's got the LA Chargers in kind of a shared home game here. Obviously, both of them at SoFi Stadium. For Akers, he's actually your running back 3 in fantasy scoring since week 13. He's number 1 with 6 rushing touchdowns in that span of time. I believe he's like 4th in red zone rushing opportunities and carries inside the 5-yard line. He's doing great stuff. Put some respect on his name. 65% snap count percentage since really taking his job back over here. Could be a league winner here based on what he's been doing during this playoff run. Ken Walker taking on the Jets this week. Brutal matchup. Seattle's offense is regressing. Overall, not looking like too good of a situation here, but he is Ken Walker. He is immensely explosive. I expected bigger things from him last week, but at the end of the day here, that matchup is a bit concerning, especially considering, as I said, that overall offense as a whole has kind of taken a step backwards, or maybe even 2 if you'd like to argue. But it sounds like they may have Tyler Lockett back this week, which would be big news. And then Miles Sanders this week taking on the New Orleans Saints. Now, Miles did miss practice on Wednesday with a knee issue. That's somewhat troubling. But what I would like to say here is that in this matchup last season, Miles and Jalen Hurts ran for over 100 yards. Having Jalen Hurts active in this game would be huge because it opens up the threat of the dual threat, obviously having an option quarterback or the potential to run zone read, essentially. If not, though, that changes things a bit here and makes it a bit tougher for Miles to produce. produce. It's kind of tough to get a read even today on Wednesday evening. I would like to know more about the quarterback position for sure, like set in stone. We are starting Gardner Minshew versus Jalen Hurts will be like a game time decision type deal. But at the end of the day, high ceiling, low floor. Kind of been the deal for Miles all season long. Into tier 5 now. So we're going to start out with Ezekiel Elliott. Kind of the exact same situation as Tony Pollard, just the flip side of overall player traits. You've got the least or lesser efficient running back here. More of the goal line battering ram type, the power running type concepts that you're going to use Zeke for. Still, I'm expecting a massive positive game script for Dallas here that, of course, is still trying to get a hold of that NFC East division title. Jerick McKinnon here taking on Denver this week. Now, Denver's defense had a lapse last week. I do kind of expect that to maybe continue against a really high-functioning offense in Kansas City right now. Regardless, though, despite the fact they've been tough against the run this year, Jerick McKinnon is not a traditional or prototypical running back. He's catching passes, he's getting out in space, and doing his damage that way. Najee Harris at Baltimore this week. This could be a potential bust performance despite having workhorse volume. Baltimore's defense has played excellent since acquiring Roquan Smith, and they've been a team that has been solid against the run at various points of this season. So essentially for Najee Harris, you're probably hoping and crossing your fingers for touchdown production or some elevated utility in the passing game. David Montgomery taking on Detroit, who was awful against the run last week. Now, this is a team that I expect to kind of refocus and regroup themselves. I'm not expecting that type of domination from the Chicago Bears this week. Now, Justin Fields might run for a party all over them here, but I do think that Chicago is a team that will have to, use the quarterback position a bit more. The reason David slips down the tiers from last week is Khalil Herbert now in week 2 off of the injured reserve. Potentially more work for him, potentially less opportunities for Montgomery. So thus lowering both his ceiling and floor. Tyler Algier in this matchup this week against Arizona, where the Buccaneers running backs just had an absolute field day against them, although their offense still stunk for almost 5 quarters, if you will, counting overtime. Regardless, Algier's been a power back. He has seen back-to-back 100-plus scrimmage yard performances, and he's playing physical, tough-nosed football right now. He is doing exactly what Atlanta needs him to do, and he's kind of supplanted CPAT as the backup running back and now, surpassed him in terms of team roles. So big stuff for Algier there. He has been getting the job done here. Brian Robinson, loved the matchup against Cleveland. He was wildly inefficient last week, however, had 22 rushing attempts. Cleveland's defense is not so hot at stopping the run, so expecting that efficiency to go up. And I did talk through this in the must-start segment. If I had to say, over or under half a rushing touchdown for Robinson this week, I'd probably take the over. Also, interesting development. They have transitioned from Taylor Heineke to Carson Wentz at quarterback. Last up, Leonard Fournette, who had 30 opportunities at the running back position last week. Super awesome volume and numbers there. 10 in the passing game, 20 on the ground. This week, Tampa Bay, they've got themselves a Carolina team, which it's kind of a feisty mix right now. Carolina controls their destiny. Obviously, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers do as well to win this week. So a lot to play for both teams. This is a really tough matchup for Fournette the first time around. That's why we've got him so low, despite the fact that he had so much volume. I think you either need touchdowns or high levels of receiving involvement to really get yourself across the finish line as a top 24 play for this week. And as a matter of fact, he is our RB23 for this game. Next up, tier 6, it is just A.J. Dillon. I couldn't really decide where I wanted to put him. I didn't feel like his role in Green Bay's offense was nearly large enough to put him in tier 5 with those other players. I also didn't feel like it was small enough to have him in the tier 7 group. So for me, this is a touchdown-dependent play. He is physical. He is a just brute force of nature that moves people out of his way. But he's been dependent on Green Bay's ability to get him inside the 5-yard line and get him touchdown attempts. He's had that for the last few weeks in a row now. And obviously, if he doesn't get there, you're probably looking at a bust-worthy performance. Last up here for the running backs, top 30, it is tier 7, starting with DeAndre Swift. One of the hardest reads on a week-to-week basis in fantasy football right now, as has Jamal Williams just become here, who was our final player on the tiers list. As you can see, Hassan Haskins did not make the list today. Again, the combination of my expectation for a negative Tennessee game script combined with the fact that I'm just not all too high on Hassan Haskins, the player. He is a physical guy, but not super explosive. They're going to need to hand him a filthy amount of touches to get him across the 3-digit rushing yardage number, if you know what I mean. Obviously, 100-plus yards is what I'm referencing there, or he's going to need some combination of high quality inside the 5-yard line touches to get the job done. So just not super confident in him here this week, but it is an option should you be without Derrick Henry. He should be widely available in most formats. Regardless, though, DeAndre Swift taking on Chicago this week. Detroit's offense is fully capable of erupting at any time. That's really the reason we like this. You're going to have opportunities to score if you're a playmaker for this team. Rachaad White on the other side of the Tampa Bay backfield from Leonard Fournette. Really solid pass catcher, arguably at times more efficient than Leonard Fournette. But as we saw last week, the volume is trending back in the direction of a healthy Leonard Fournette. So kind of an interesting dynamic to follow throughout this season. But Rachaad White has still maintained some value. Pacheco here this week, the Kansas City Chiefs, as we talked about, taking on Denver. They ran the ball very good against them. The first time these two teams matched up a couple weeks back, I believe that was week 14. Expecting similar results here. Very low ceiling for Isaiah Pacheco each week. But if you're kind of down bad at running back, which you are if you're starting Isaiah Pacheco or any of these final names here, he could be a solid 8 to 9 points, regardless of format, because he's really not catching passes. So obviously, the closer you are to standard, which who really plays standard fantasy football this day at this day and age. But regardless, you guys get what I'm trying to say here. Deontay Foreman, this has been another player at Tampa Bay this week that I've struggled to accurately get a read on this year in matchups where it seems like the opposition is very favorable for him to go out and have a massive game, hence the Seahawks contest. He throws out an absolute stinker, doesn't find the end zone. You're seeing more distributed touches to other teammates. And then last week, when I jumped off ship, Detroit had been absolutely suffocating opposing running backs. They allow a 320-plus total yard performance on the ground to the Panthers, including 100-plus yards for Chuba Hubbard and Foreman, and a touchdown for Foreman. So really tough stuff to predict here. It's hit or miss. It honestly depends on how the game script unfolds, which is another incredibly unpredictable metric for this game. J.K. Dobbins this week taking on the Pittsburgh Steelers. J.K. has got himself a really interesting situation where both him and Gus Edwards, according to Coach Harbaugh, are not on a snap or pitch count. However, they've both not necessarily, or let's just put it this way, they've gotten in each other's way. We saw this last week. JK's efficiency came way down and then didn't have the volume to get him across the finish line after I had given him my full vote of confidence. So it's tough to get a read for these committee-style offenses, especially when you've got a guy in the backfield like Gus Edwards who can take rushing touchdowns away on the goal line. He just is built physically to do those types of things. So frustrating stuff there. And then Jamal Williams against Chicago, I talked about with DeAndre Swift. High-powered offense. If they get carries inside the 5, probably heading Jamal's way. Hasn't for a couple of weeks now. He's been really down in his production at the worst time of the season to kind of flunk out here. But for Jamal Williams owners, if you need him this week, I've got him as a middling RB3 in 12-team formats. So there you have it, my top 30 running backs for Week 17, championship week here of fantasy football. Good luck to all of you, regardless of what place you're playing for. As always, we've got ourselves our Discord server. If you're looking for questions to be asked and answered, check that out. Link is in the description of today's episode. Check us out on Twitter at Sizzle Fantasy as well. We're posting updates, thoughts on games, all kinds of stuff. If you ask me a question in my mentions, I will hopefully check that before game time. So look at all that stuff. Give it a peek. I am running a promo this week as well for Underdog Fantasy. If you guys have not signed up for Underdog yet and use code SFS when you deposit $10 or more, I'm giving away our entire 2023 All Access Pass, which includes our redraft kit, dynasty kit, and rookie kit, all for free for $10 essentially for you to play with on their platform. Again, that's Underdog Fantasy. There's also a link to them in the description of today's episode. Super fun stuff. I'm not going to be running that promo after this week passes through here. So Tuesday of next week, it'll be a slightly different offer for just one of those 3 things that I mentioned. But for now, you can get it all for free using that code SFS. So check that stuff out. If you're still watching today's episode, I appreciate the heck out of you. Check out our wide receiver episode, which will be much shorter than this one. It always is for some reason. And I'm about to sit down and record that. We're already sitting. I'm about to turn the camera off and then turn it back on again. And I'll be recording that, and I'll see you there. Peace out.